Hello, thank you for coming again. This is the 5th lecture of Untold History, and today we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic. Here, as you can see, this is St. Peter's Square, the seat of the Vatican, and the title of today's lecture is City of God with a question mark. And before we start the lecture, let me say that I'm not going to be talking about individuals. This is not pointing out what certain individuals do. It's talking about a system, Roman Catholicism. So it's not an attack to Catholics. It's just an expose of Roman Catholicism and the system, the religious system as whole. So please don't take offense with the things I'm going to share. And now we can start with the lecture. I've got some slides now. Most of them are in Spanish, from Spanish newspapers, but I'll translate a little bit. It's just maybe just a few slides. That says a Pope for eternity. That's when John Paul II died, and he died the 2nd of April 2005. Here you have it at the BBC News. John Paul II dies in Vatican. That was the next day, Sunday the 3rd, but he died the night before. And that's when you add up the numbers on that day, 2 for 2nd and 4 April 2 and 5, 2005 equals 13. Then also newspapers and the media were telling you what time he died. He died 21:37 local time. That's in Italy. This is when John Paul II died. That's an extract from a newspaper. Dear brothers and sisters, at 21:37. So it shocked me that they were very specific with the time. Rather than saying 20 to 10 or 10:15, they were saying no, 21:37. Like if the minutes were really, really important. So our beloved Holy Father, John Paul, has returned to his home, meaning that they say he's gone back to heaven, blah, blah. So if you add again the numbers, 2 add 1 add 3 add 7 equals 13. Then was when a few days later Ratzinger was chosen as the new Pope, Benedict XVI. And he was the Pope number 265 in the history of the Catholic Church. Here you can see it. German Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger elected 2665th Pope. And guess what? 2 add 6 add 5 also equals 13. At the time, you know, the tradition is that the cardinals meet, and when they have chosen a pope, there is white smoke coming out of a chimney, and then everybody outside in the square, they know that a pope has been chosen, but they don't know who he is yet. So that's the time the white smoke came out. That means the white smoke announces at 1750 the election of the Pope in the 4th vote. They took four times to vote. So it's the same. 1 add 7 add 5 equals 13. The time a cardinal came up to the balcony and said, Habemus Papam, that means we have a Pope, was at 1840 minutes. He's the cardinal that announced we've got a Pope in Latin. Here says at 1840 the balcony was open in the Basilica of St. Peter, and then Cardinal from Chile, Jorge Arturo Medina Estevez, he announced the identity of the new chosen Pope. And guess what? It's the same. 1 add 8 add 4 equals 13. Another thing that was on the media is that John Paul II was the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope, number 848 to be buried next to St. Peter. They say that St. Peter is buried there. I'm talking about the Catholic Church. They say St. Peter is buried there. And he was the 148th Pope to be buried there. That's in Spanish. That F is the press, Spanish press. And here you can see says 148, because says, talking about this place, this basilica, is found the tomb of St. Peter, first father of the Catholic Church. John Paul II will be The Bishop of Rome, number 148, to be buried next to him. 1 add 4 and add 8 equals 13. So now we're going to see all these numbers that seem like a coincidence. See how many there was. He dies, the date equals 13. The time he died equals 13. The time the white smoke came out equals 13. The new pope in history equals 13. And the time we had Habemus Papam equals 13. And the order of burial next to Peter also equals 13. So do you think it's a coincidence, so many 13s? You can find the same thing with the election of Pope Francis. I didn't have time because this is an old lecture I had ready from that time. But if one day I've got time, I'll put up one very similar with Pope Francis, and you find the same. You find 13s in many places. And that's what 13 means. In occultism, means in the Kabbalah, means death, transformation, and total change. 12 plus 1 equals Messiah, but also 13 means Lucifer or Satan, depending which side of the deity you want to worship. They say Lucifer is the light side and Satan is the dark side. But it's interesting that 13 means all these things. Do you remember the story of Fatima in Portugal? The story goes that in Portugal, many years ago, in 1917, there was an apparition of the Virgin of Fatima that she appeared to 3 kids, and she revealed some secrets to those kids. Also, what she said is to 2 of them, he said they were very good, but to another one said, you be careful, keep praying a little bit more, otherwise you're going to end up in hell. So imagine poor kid, he must have been pretty scared. And the apparitions were reported even by the media, and I'll show you the pictures in a minute. And here's that's what is interesting. An angel who identified himself as the angel of peace appeared first to the 3 children of Fatima, that little village in Portugal. They were prepared for it before the apparitions that would occur a year later. The 3 children were Lucia dos Santos, he was 9, and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, ages 8 and 6 years respectively. And look when the apparitions happened. They said it was the Blessed Virgin Mary, and on the 13th day during 6 months, starting on May 13th. So every 13th of every month for 6 months, they had this angel or this Virgin Mary appearing and giving different messages. That's just a portrait of what it looked like, what the kids described what they saw. That's the 3 children. That's the gathering, because that was witnessed by over 70,000 people. And as he said, even the media, the newspapers of those days, reported it. So it wasn't just that the 3 kids made up a story. No, there was more than 70,000 people. And it's not one occurrence. It happened every month, once a month, every 13th of May for 6 months. And there's something very interesting we find in the Bible, in a letter written by Paul. He says, and no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising then if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness, that means good doing, good deeds. Their end will be what their actions deserve. So the Bible is warning, says, Satan has the power to appear as a good angel, as an angel of light, as a good being. That was when there was an attempt on John Paul II's life. He was shot, and notice the date. He was shot on May 13th in 1981. Interesting, isn't it? It was on the 13th. Pope says that now Pope Benedict, he will allow John Paul II's sainthood course to open immediately. And when did he announce this? On May 13th. He announced that Pope John II could be or would be on the run to be declared a saint. Info Católica. In Spain, the Catholic Church opens a TV channel, and the channel is called 13 TV. I find it fascinating. And you can watch it. I was recently in Spain, and it's still running almost 24/7 with many programs and interviews and documentaries. But it's a Catholic channel, and it's got the number 13 on it. Okay, something else that we're going to talk about today is the sacred pillar, also known as the obelisk, or some people also call it a stela. And I think you are all familiar with what an obelisk is. They come from Egypt, from the city of Heliopolis. That's where the obelisk origins. Basically, Heliopolis means the city of the sun. The city of the sun. Sun is S-U-N, okay? The obelisk symbolized the sun god Ra. It was also thought that the god existed within the structure. So they believed that the sun god existed inside that obelisk, and you get power and energies and a message from that obelisk. And that's very interesting. At the bottom says, obelisk might have been inspired by previously overlooked astronomical phenomena connected with sunrise and sunset, the zodiacal light, and sun pillars, respectively. That's what it's a symbol of for sun worship. And there is more behind, and we're going to see it in a minute. That's an example of two standing obelisks today in Egypt. We've seen the picture earlier on. That's St. Peter's Square. And what do you see in the middle? Yeah, that's a standing obelisk, which we've seen stands for the sun god. There is a circle around it, which has a meaning. That's the obelisk standing in front of the balcony at the Vatican. It's very interesting that there is another one in front of the Capitol in Washington. So when the Pope stands out, and is addressing the multitudes, all the crowd gathered, he's got the obelisk in front of him. And when the President of the US is addressing the crowd, the people, in front of the Capitol, when he does a speech, he also has the biggest obelisk in the world, the George Washington Monument, is standing in front of him. And if you look at both buildings, the Capitol and the Vatican, they are like a mirror image. They look the same. Okay, New Age magazine had an article by a 33-degree Freemason called Henry Ridgely Evans, in which he said that Osiris, which is the sun god, the god of the underworld, the god of the dead, was also depicted in the form of a pillar, of an obelisk. Albert G. Mackey, another 33-degree Freemason, in a book called A Manual of the Lodge, he says, the point within the circle is an interesting and important symbol in Freemasonry. Why is it a point within a circle? Because did you notice earlier on I mentioned there is a circle around the obelisk? In many places where you go, when you see a standing obelisk, you will see a circle around. Because looking from above, you see a point and there is a circle around. That's what you see. The symbol is really a beautiful but somewhat abstruse allusion to the old sun worship, and introduces us for the first time to that modification of it among the ancients as the worship of the phallus. So basically is sex worship also, because the obelisk stands for a member, for the male. The symbolism regarding solar worship indicated by the point within the circle has many variations, but one of the most primitive and natural was that the sun was to be regarded as the male generative power of nature. The sun god was certainly the generator of life, light and heat, the male principle, and this was symbolically represented by the phallus or lingam, which was some picture more or less veiled of the human generative organ, the male organ. The most frequent illustration was a pillar set up in the center of a circle, like the one we just seen in the Vatican, St. Peter's Square. The circle just as distinctively represented the earth of female principle. So you had the male and the female that generate and produce life. So it's an old form of sex worship, really. Here you can see from above. Can you see from above? Is a point within a circle, and there is another circle. And have you noticed this pattern? What does it look like? Does it sound familiar? Come on, you're English. Does it not sound familiar, this pattern? Yes, it's what you get in the Union Jack, because the Union Jack is based in sun worship too. You can find in ancient art, and that's been worked in sculpture, in rock, you find the same pattern, especially in Mesopotamia, Babylon, all those areas. You find the same pattern, and stood for the sun god. It's sun worship. Here you can see in India, another part of the world, another religion, but you find the same sun wheel. Sun temple in India, another sun temple in another town also in India. Can you see the pattern? There is 8 legs or 8 rays coming out of the center. The same thing you find in St. Peter's Square. And now we're going to talk, well, let's see what the obelisk from the Vatican, where did it come from? The red granite obelisk of the Vatican is itself 83 feet high and weighs 320 tons, so it's pretty heavy. In 1586, in order to center it in front of the church in St. Peter's Square, it was moved to its present location by order of Pope Sixtus V. So it was a pope that gave the order for that obelisk to be put in the Vatican, in front of the Vatican. Of course, moving this heavy obelisk, especially in those days, was a very difficult task. Many movers refused to attempt the feat, especially since the Pope had attached the death penalty if the obelisk was dropped or unbroken. Because to him, and many people, this is a sacred object, it's a holy object. But we've seen that stands for the male organ. With 25 winches, 160 horses, and a crew of 800 workmen, the task of moving began. While the obelisk was being moved, the crowd, upon penalty of death, was requested to remain silent. But after the obelisk was successfully erected, there was the sound of hundreds of bells ringing, the roar of cannons, and the loud cheers of the multitude. Just fascinating that they celebrate standing up an obscene object, really. That's interesting, because most people, when they think about Christianity, straight away they think about Catholicism, Catholic Church. Pope is the head of Christianity, he represents Christianity. Vatican is the city of God, hence the title for this lecture. But that's what we read in the Bible. Leviticus, one of the first books in the Bible, in the Old Testament, says, that's God's talking to Moses, and says, "You shall make you no idols, no graven image." Have you ever seen a Catholic church? Have you walked into a Catholic church? How many images do you see? Loads. You shall make you no idols, no graven image, neither rear you a standing pillar, neither shall you set up any image of stone in your land. Neither shall you set up a pillar, which is an obelisk, which the Lord your God hates. It's a strong word. God hates those things. And Judah, it's not talking about a person, it's talking about a tribe, so that involves thousands of people. And Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord. That's someone writing this book, Book of Kings. It's a record of the kings of Israel. So someone wrote what they were doing. Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sins which they had committed, above all that their fathers had done. So they were going astray. For they also built them high places and pillars, that's obelisks, and groves on every high hill and under every green tree. Remember when we watched the Bohemian Club? Where did they meet? They meet in the trees. They meet amongst the trees in the forest, because it's where it comes from. It's very ancient pagan worship, where they used to worship animals, sun, moon, stars, sex worship. That's another writer in 2 Kings also records, as soon as Jehu had finished making the burnt offering, Jehu was a Jew, he ordered the guards and officers, go in and kill them, let no one escape. So they cut them down with the sword, they killed them. The guards and officers threw the bodies out and then entered the inner shrine of the temple of Baal. They brought the sacred stone, which is a pillar, an obelisk, out of the temple of Baal and burned it. They demolished the sacred stone of Baal and tore down the temple of Baal. So every time in the Bible you find the name pillar, sacred stone, the standing pillar, is always in a negative way, and always God hates it, and he commands the Jews to destroy those things. That is Jehu, the Jewish king we just mentioned, and is found in a black obelisk done by an Assyrian king, Shalmaneser III, where he's bowing down. You can see him here. He's bowing down to the Assyrian king. And notice here, that's the sun god Shamash. You see it's the same thing you see in the, it represents the sun god. Circle within a circle, and then the 8 legs. Here is another representation for the sun god. Is a winged solar disk, which you find in Chrysler today, and in some movies and producing companies, Hollywood companies use the same symbol, a winged sun disk. So this man existed. He existed for real, Jehu. That's very similar to the symbol NATO. NATO has this symbol. Notice the name Baal. We just read Baal. Baal, Hatzor stone, sun worship. Tablet from the early 9th century BC, which depicts the Babylonian sun god Shamash, this giant man here, seated on the right, holding emblems of his authority. A staff and a ring, and the king with 2 attendants on the left here. Notice he's got a staff. Notice his hat, and in the center there is a large 4-point sun image. Here you see the 4 big points with a circle in the middle, and small wavy rays between the points, which also stands for sun worship. Look, that's John Paul II. What do you see behind? Do you see a similarity? Look at it. We're going to compare it now. Here, the 4 arms with the wavy ray ones, another 4. Can you see what's behind him? You get the 4 arms and the wavy rays around. Here on the right hand side picture, that's Benedict XVI standing in the balcony, and just below him you see again that looks like a cross with the 4 wavy rays standing on each side. So it stands for sun worship. Here above the balcony you find again 5 pointed stars. Can you see them where I'm pointing? Here, 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 another one. I mean, there is loads. They're all 8 pointed stars, which stands for sun god, also stands for Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess, the queen of heaven. That's where we get our Easter holiday. Comes from Babylon, doesn't come from Christianity. Notice that's Pope John Paul II and Pope Pius XII. Can you see there is a shape here? This is also 8 pointed, looks like an 8 pointed star with a cross inside with the wavy rays again. And notice this, look at the pattern. I'll show you now another religion that has the same pattern. Here you can see bigger. Can you see 8 points, something that looks like a cross, which really stands for sun, the sun god. And here you have the wavy rays. That's Islam. You see the similarities? It's the same, it's an 8 pointed star. And really it's a square within a square. It's interesting that this symbol is also used by the police in England. If you see, look at the badge of the police. It's an 8-pointed star or a square within a square. That the square within a square is the same meaning of a triangle within a triangle, like the hexagram. That's inside St. Peter Basilica in St. Peter Square. That's inside the Vatican. Notice again, 8-pointed star, 8-pointed star, 8-pointed star, all around the floor. And can you recognize, you know what these 4 columns are? They are serpents, they are snakes. The greatest serpents in the world are found on Bernini's canopy in Rome, surrounding the tomb of St. Peter. Interestingly enough, St. Paul's Cathedral in London, which once was Protestant but now is Catholic, is now rebuilt as an exact duplicate of the Vatican and also has serpent pillars. Why would you have serpent pillars standing inside the Vatican? What we just read in the Bible, that God says, you shall not rear you up any image, if Christianity is based on the Bible. Why is that? That's Benedict XVI. Too many popes in my head, I get mixed up. You see what he has in his mitra? 2 6-pointed stars, which many people think is a Jewish symbol, because you find it in the Jewish flag, in the flag of Israel. But here you have the head of the Catholic Church, which got nothing to do with Judaism. And in his mitra, he has 2 hexagrams, 2 6-pointed stars. And what's the meaning of the hexagram? The hexagram is used in magic, witchcraft, occultism, and the casting of zodiacal horoscopes internationally and by all races. It is used as standby for magicians and alchemists. The sorcerers believed it represented the footprint of a special kind of demon and used it in ceremonies both to call up demons and to keep them away. And a former Satanist, Bill Schnoebelen, he also was a Freemason, a Mormon. He wrote, to the sorcerer, the hexagram is a powerful tool to invoke Satan. Wow. And the Pope has 2 in his mitra. Do you think the Pope represents God on earth, like they want us to believe? That's what the hexagram is made of. 1 triangle pointing up and 1 triangle pointing down. We mentioned a little bit on the first lecture, but I'll get in more detail now. The triangle pointing downward is a female symbol corresponding to the yoni, and the upward pointing triangle is the male, the lingam. When the two triangles are interlaced, it represents the union of the active and passive forces in nature. It represents the male and female elements. So it's the same again, it's sex worship, male, female unity. Those who believed in the physical significance of the hexagram thought that the communication between the living and the dead was possible and adopted the dogma of reincarnation. So those that use the hexagram in the rituals, originally in Babylon, they believed that you could talk to the dead, and they believed in reincarnation, that you never died, but your life always is recycling. And these are very, very good quotes. Most of them are from Masonic lodges or people who's investigating other religions. Because, as you can see, the gods of India, one of the quotes, one of them is by Albert G. Mackey. They were both 33rd degree Freemasons. They were high up in Freemasonry. Remember we saw the god Shamash carrying a staff in his hand? That's an Egyptian god, Osiris, the sun god, also the god of the dead. No, he's got a mitra, and he has a staff with a serpent shape. Here you have other staffs, and who carries these two staffs with a winged dragon and a snake, a serpent? Cardinal O'Malley with a crosier and a mitra, like the sun god Shamash. Notice the shape again, it's the same. Look at Osiris and look at the cardinal. Also he has a winged lion on his mitra. It's a symbol of Babylon. Babylon used to have, well, even today, the Easter Gate that is found in the museum. I think it's in the British Museum in London or in Berlin, I'm not sure. You find the Easter Gate, and in that gate you see winged lions. Here the Phoenician god Dagon, he was the fish god. That's how the priest would wear. Notice at the shape of the mitra. Can you see the shape at the top? It's like the mouth of the fish opened. And that's a comparison of the mitra of the popes and the mitra of the priest of Dagon. Notice here, can you see the similarities? It's like an open mouth, it's the same thing. Dagon priest sprinkling holy water. Here you have a cardinal or bishop also sprinkling holy water to the crowd. That's a recent one. Pope Francis, the actual Pope, also sprinkling holy water. That's a Hindu goddess. Notice the mitra. That's also another mitra for an Assyrian winged bull cherubim at the British Museum. That's another mitra for a Mesopotamian deity. And notice the mitra that what the popes wear. Notice they are triple crown. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Because it's the same old pagan system of worship. It's just that it's been Christianized because they use Christian terminology, but it's got nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever. The tiara of Pope Sixtus, there is a pyramid on top, and there is a snakes all around it. That's a very interesting one. An Assyrian king from the 9th century BC, so 900 years BC, and he's wearing a cross in a necklace. Notice here there is also the 8-pointed star, a compass, which is used today in Freemasonry. That's a solar disk and a half moon, which is the symbol used by Islam, but Islam wasn't even created here. Islam didn't even exist 900 years BC, because Muhammad wasn't even born. That's a triple crown, like the Pope wears, a triple mitra. That's another picture of the same Assyrian king. And notice the cross in his chest. That's called a Maltese cross. And what does the Maltese cross stand for? The vestments of the priests of Horus, the sun god, the Egyptian sun god, were covered with these crosses. Can you see it's the same cross? Maltese cross. By the way, this is a quote from Albert Pike, that he wrote a book addressed to 33-degree Freemasons called Ancient Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. We'll see more quotes from this book. And that's what he said, that the priests of Horus wear those crosses. So who wears those crosses today? The Pope. So who is he? People say he's representing God on earth, or he's the Holy Father. But really what he's representing is Dagon, the fish god, and the sun god, because he's the priest of the sun god, S-U-N God. And here you can see another one, also Pope Francis with the Maltese cross. That's a normal crucifix. That's what usually a crucifix looks like. And that's the crucifix that popes carry. Can you see the difference? Here you can tell that is Jesus. I mean, whether Jesus looked like this or not, we don't know. But you assume it's Jesus. You can see the figure of a man on a cross. And here you see this cross is bent sideways, and also is bent forward. You can see it better. Can you see here it's bent sideways? And here you can see it's bent forward. And can you recognize that that's a man hanging there? Yeah, but it's like a very distorted image of someone. Here, so you can see all different popes. John Paul II, Ratzinger wearing, Pope Francis also carries the same cross. Can you see here? He's carrying the same cross with a pine cone, which also has a meaning. And what's the meaning of the broken cross? A sinister symbol used by Satanists in the 6th century that had been revived at the time of Vatican II. That's in the 1960s, when suddenly the Vatican became more open and they started inviting other churches to join them in what is called ecumenism, which is basically is the New World Order. It's uniting all religions. This was a bent or broken cross on which was displayed a repulsive and distorted figure of Jesus Christ, which the black magicians and sorcerers of the Middle Ages had made use of to represent the biblical term mark of the beast. Remember on the second lecture we mentioned mark of the beast when we talked about the microchip, when we said no one is going to be able to buy or sell unless they have the mark of the beast. And we said, oh, we're going to see if this is true, is something that someone wrote that was crazy. Yet, not only Paul VI, but his successors, the 2 John Pauls, carried that object and held it up to be revered by crowds who had not the slightest idea that it stood for Antichrist. So could it be possible that the biggest religious organization in the world claims to be Christian and claims to be the representative of God on earth, but they are really anti-Christ? They hate Jesus Christ? Could that be possible? Sounds familiar? The straight rays and the wavy rays with a solar sun in the middle. The most appropriate form for the monstrance, that's what this object is called, is that of the sun emitting its rays to all sides. And look at the source. That's a Catholic saying that. 1913, the Catholic Encyclopedia. It's not me making it up. They even tell you that that stands for sun, for the sun. That's, what is he standing on? What's a sun? It's not a coincidence. And he held a mass in front of 6 million people. So people say to me, oh, lecture about the Vatican, they don't have any power, you know, they are not important. Well, has more power than any other figure in the world, because no one can gather 6 million people in one place. Whether you are the Rolling Stones, Red Hot Chili Peppers, U2, whoever you are, you don't gather 6 million people. Obama, Tony Blair, or David Cameron, they don't gather 6 million people in one place. So who's more popular? The Pope or the music industry and politicians? The Pope. But people are ignorant of many things. Notice Egypt, all-seeing eye. Notice the cow is the god Apis, which was revered and worshipped. That's the horns, which represent the womb or the female, and that's the seat of the male, which represents the sun. That's how you get sun and moon worship. That's the sun and the circle, peel and the circle. It's the same male-female worship mixed with astrology worship, sun and moon. Here again, the sun and half moon, Assyrian-style relief of King Barakab from Syria, 8th century BC. Notice is Baal, the sun god, and the moon. Can you see? It's a disk in a crescent moon. Here you can see it even better in other piece of work. You can see a star with 4 straight rays and then the other 4. Another half moon and a rounded sun disk. That's also, I believe it's in Phoenicia. A fish, because also fish was worshipped, as we saw in Phoenicia, the sun god Dagon. And he has 2 horns, like a bull, and a disc in the middle, inside. That's the, what is he called? I forgot the name. In Spanish it's called hostia. Host, yes, the host. In Spanish it's called hostia. And that's where the Pope or the Bishop or the priest does when he's at church. He holds up the host that stands for the sun god, and he puts it inside this cup. And what's inside the cup? This. So where do you place it? You place it on top of the crescent moon, half moon, yes, that's right. You can see from above, that's where the host sits. So represents the male, female coming together to produce life, sun and moon, sun worship, moon worship. You see the same in Islam. Interesting that two apparently opposite religions have the same symbology. Sun, star, and the half moon. That's two mosques. That's a picture taken from an Arabic country at the time. That's quite a good picture. Right at the time of the sunset, where the sun sits between the half crescent moon. That's ancient relics. Notice he's winged. He's also holding a pine cone, which is a symbol of fertility. Ritual also is again, sex worship is a symbol for fertility. Pine cone in the staff of Osiris, the sun god of Egypt. In his staff, there is a pine cone. Sun god in Mexico, pine cones. And the biggest pine cone in the world is found in the Vatican. And see what the Bible says. And be aware not to lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them. That's what we've seen they're doing. And serve them, those which the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. They forsook all the commands of the Lord their God and made for themselves two idols cast in the shape of calves. Remember the cow we've seen in Egypt? So they worshipped cows. Is there a religion today that considers cows to be sacred? Hinduism. Hinduism worships cows. Cows are sacred in countries where Hinduism is being established. And Asherah pole, that's an obelisk, they bow down to all the starry hosts and they worship Baal, which is the pole also. Baal is the male, Asherah is the female, because they were interchangeable. And contrary to my command, has worshipped other gods, bowing down to them, or to the sun, or the moon, or the stars in the sky. It's fascinating that the Bible forbids all these things, but then a so-called Christian religion that supposedly follows the Bible is doing completely the opposite. That's a very interesting thing. That's God is giving a vision to a man called Ezekiel, and then in his vision, that's what he saw. That's what he saw. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, that's the temple, the sanctuary, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east. So they weren't worshipping God because they had their backs to the temple, but they were worshipping to the east because they were worshipping the sun, and they worshipped the sun toward the east. And you think God was happy? Then he said unto me, that he means God, hast thou seen this, O son of man? Is it a light thing to the house of Judah, that's inhabitants of the tribe of Judah, that they commit the abominations which they commit here? So God, we have seen, every time sun worship appears in the Bible, is not positive at all. Now I'm going to read just something a woman wrote that I believe is going to happen soon, and it's starting to happen. And she wrote it in the late 18th century, beginning of 19th century. No, sorry, yeah, late 19th century. When our nation, talking about the United States of America, shall abjure the principles of our government as to enact a Sunday law, Protestantism will in this act join hands with Popery. That's the Vatican, the Catholic Church. Protestants will throw their whole influence and strength on the side of the papacy. That's the Vatican. by a national act enforcing the false Sabbath, Sunday, they will give life and vigor to the corrupt faith of Rome, reviving her tyranny and oppression of conscience. She also wrote, in 1905, sooner or later, Sunday laws will be passed. So she wrote that 110 years ago. Political corruption is destroying love of justice and regard for truth. And even in free America, rulers and legislators, in order to secure public favor, will yield to the popular demand for a law enforcing Sunday observance. And we mentioned that America was based and created as a Protestant country where the government had not the power to enforce religious laws upon the people, but these prophecies that she wrote, she says that that's going to change. That American Protestant that was founded by people running away from the Catholic Church because of religious persecution in Europe, they're going to go back to Rome and they are going to enforce in everybody the Sunday, day of rest that has its origin in Rome and not in the Bible. The EU is not going to be only America. The European Union must keep Sunday, says Catholic Church. Wow. And it's not just as the Pope says. Even members of the Parliament, European Parliament, have an amendment saying that the minimum rest period shall in principle include Sunday. It's funny that it's Sunday. That's what the day comes. It's from the day of worshipping the sun. That's what it's called, Sunday. And there is in the Brussels-based Commission of the Bishops Conferences of the European Community, so it's the Catholic Church who's pushing that, the Catholic bishops, agrees, recommending the directive should say the minimal weekly rest must include Sunday. The Pope trumpets Sunday. The Pontiff conducted a Mass with over 1 million people where he stressed the importance of Sunday worship. He said, Sunday is a free day, yet this free time is empty if God is not present. But it's fascinating because every time Sunday appears in the Bible or Sun worship, God says he hated it. So which God is he talking about? Benedict declared that the reinforcement of Sunday worship is fundamental to his mission, and it was, and is fundamental also for Pope Francis. He even said, we cannot live without Sunday. The European Sunday Alliance, that's a group of people in Europe that they are pushing forth, promoting Sunday as a day of rest, as a day of worship for everybody in Europe. The Alliance participated in the public consultation on the review on the Working Time Directive. The European Sunday Alliance, European Day for a Work-Free Sunday, that was this year, 3rd of March 2015. So they're going to use working, economy, family, rest to promote Sunday worship and rest, whether you're a believer or not. Vatican works to stop Sunday shopping in Italy. So sun worship is something very, very important. Vatican City, the Roman Catholic Church, trade unions and small business associations have joined forces in a bid to save Sundays. Even the Italian Prime Minister, Mario Monti, backed a new law that allows shops to stay open on the Sabbath. But Sunday traditions are strong in the European nation, and the change provoked strong resistance from religious and secular groups. Campaign to free up Sundays, the European Sunday Alliance lobbied the European Union to keep Sunday as a continent-wide day of rest. So as we have seen, the Catholic Church uses symbols that the Bible forbids. Those symbols are based in sun worship and other deities. And now they are promoting Sunday as a day of rest. In this lecture, probably you have been thinking, oh, why is Danny using quotes from the Bible? If the Bible is an ancient book that is just for kids, or not even kids can believe it. So if you are patient, in the next 4 lectures, I'm going to deal specifically with the Bible. We're going to go through its history, archaeology, what the Bible says about science, that we are not told what it says, and I'll show you the slides. And we're going to be looking at prophecy, what the Bible says is going to happen in the near future. And many of you are going to be surprised, because it's things that they won't teach you in many churches, and they won't teach you at school or at university, and they won't even teach you on television, that's for sure. So thank you for coming. And next week, we'll have a lecture called The Unknown Book, and we're going to be talking about science in the Bible.